This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. Now, if you love technology and you've been getting the latest devices for the last decade or two, you probably already have an idea on where the background behind that quote. And if you don't, we'll get to it in just a moment. Obviously, Tony Walker here, and I do thank you for watching here on the YouTube channel this playlist specifically on a biblical theology of technology. Without repeating everything that we've talked about in the last couple of videos, in video part 0, the preliminary things, just kind of laid out the idea behind this playlist in the videos that will follow. Student taking MDiv classes at Anderson University. One of my most recent classes in my previous semester was a class in biblical theology. For the final project, we had to write a paper. The teacher gave us some pretty wide liberty on what we could write about. And so I decided to take two things I love, the Bible and theology, and then technology, and hopefully not too much forcing them together, but kind of see how we can look at a biblical framework and the role of technology in the history of the technology as well in the life of a Christian. And then in the second video, part 1, I called that the preface. Obviously, I'm not writing a book, but in this paper, I wanted to give something that was more than just academic, but I wanted to tell a story, kind of to draw in the reader, in the case of the paper, my teacher, and in the future, any others who may read this or watch these videos. Instead of just jumping up with the forefront on here's the facts, why am I interested in this? Why do I have a greater stake in this than trying to make an A in the class? Well, it's because it involves something I love, technology. And as a new Christian in the year 2001, and then in the next couple of years after that, between 2004, the Lord used various things to take my new love for Christ and my interest in technology and kind of form those two and bridge those two and mold those two until what eventually became in 2004, probably the biggest takeaway from that time in my life, lasted a decade, from 2004 to 2014, the Bible broadcast here locally on the radio and then on the internet at preachertony.com and in the iTunes podcast section of the iTunes store, the Bible podcast. So in this video, in the next part in this YouTube playlist series, today we're going to come to the introduction. This is a day that I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple has been, well, first of all, one's very fortunate to get to work on just one of these in your career. Apple's been very fortunate. It's been able to introduce a few of these into the world. In 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. It didn't just change Apple, it changed the whole computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. And it didn't just change the way we listen to music, it changed the entire music industry. Well, today we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone, and here it is. That was from the most exciting part of the keynote there at Macworld. And that was obviously Steve Jobs on January the 9th, 2007. Hit pause on reading the paper now. If you've never watched that keynote, if you care about technology, I'd have to say from a technological perspective, that would be one of the top couple of computer-related announcements ever. Just in my little humble opinion. The point in that presentation where he says these are not three devices, these are one device. These are one device, and if you remember in the video, the three icons on the screen start spinning and morph into one to emphasize what he's trying to say. And then he pulls the phone. I believe he had it in his front pocket or back pocket and pulled it out and showed the crowd. And then the crowd, just goes crazy. So back to the paper. Perhaps the most consequential product release in our generation. What should a Christian think about this revolutionary announcement? It is hard to believe that it was only a little more than a decade ago when the smartphone started to gain mainstream usage. When Apple released its iPhone, it was by far the most advanced device in its category. And then nearly immediately, or give or take immediately, very soon, it began to cannibalize devices in many other categories. Think now, when's the last time you pulled out a camcorder? Or when's the last time you pulled out a GPS device, or a compass, or a calculator, or a notepad with an ink pen in your front pocket? Our phones have replaced many of those things. What kept the fanfare from reaching instant ubiquity was its high unsubsidized price, $5.99 if I remember correctly, and its service being limited to only one carrier, AT&T, here in America. A year later, the phone started selling at a lower carrier-subsidized price, $1.99. Oh, the days would go back to that. 3 years later, it moved to the largest network in America, Verizon, with the iPhone 4, and the rest is history. However, the fascination we have with technology did not start with the smartphone, but has a lineage that goes back before most of us were born, as each recent decade has been filled with marvels of innovation. Here in the next paragraph in this paper, I'm borrowing heavily from this work right here, Walter Isaacson, The Innovators, very good book, How a Group of Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution, best of 2014, by the New York Times, Washington Post, and Financial Times. So this next paragraph is mainly a summary of some content that I found in this book. In the world of modern technology, there are several things that can be called revolutionary. Approximately, or loosely, follows here is a decade-by-decade sampling. In the fall of 1945, the ENIAC was shown in a public demonstration. And to build up the fanfare, it even had ping pong balls that were cut in half and placed over lights so that when the lights would blink, it would kind of give a glow, and that increased to the dramatic effect. The microchip was put on display in New York City in the next decade, in 1959. Texas Instruments president said, quote, that it would be the most important invention since the transistor. Douglas Engelbart gave a live demonstration in 1968 of what is now considered to be the foundation pieces of computing. The event has been dubbed, quote, the mother of all demos. On January 11th, 1971, Don Hoefler wrote a series of local news columns that referred to an area of California by another phrase that would stick, Silicon Valley. Jeff Raskin's private 1979 corporate essay, Computers by the Millions, opens and closes with these words. If personal computers are to be truly personal, it will have to be as likely as not that a family, picked at random, will own one. And then at the end of his essay, is the designer of a personal computer system doing good or evil? The main question is this: what will millions of people do with them? I admit my bias, but I still cannot watch the 1984 introduction of the original Macintosh without wondering what it would have been like to attend in person. The demonstration came to a halt for 5 minutes as the audience erupted with a standing ovation, fist pumps, cheers, and jumping up and down. A computer that had a screen, a mouse, a keyboard, and a graphical user interface was something the audience knew was going to change everything regarding how the average person used technology. And even if you don't really care about computers, that is a pretty cool video to watch if you look it up on YouTube. The very first, not the second time it happened, a little bit later, but the very first time that Steve Jobs introduced to a crowd the Macintosh back in 1984. Very, very, very cool video, in my opinion. The final decade of the millennium, getting into the 90s, was filled with a four-paned logo of red, green, blue, and yellow that we call Windows. Computer boxes and mouse pads that look like cow prints, and four infamous words that L. Edwards recorded onto a cassette tape for a grand total of $200. Though the WAV file echoed around the world as households around the world logged on, he actually, other than that $200, never got to cash in on his voice. He made the voiceover as a favor for his wife, who worked at a new company that aimed to get America online. In those four words.
This is my Uber driver, and he just told me something very special, that he's the voice behind...
Welcome. You've got mail.
No way! Do it again, do it again.
Welcome. You've got mail.
Yay. Okay, what's your name?
Elwood Edwards.
Elwood Edwards. Thank you.
You bet.
Four words. Welcome. You've got mail. Was God in any of this? The computer and the internet are among the most important inventions of our era. It's how Walter Isaacson opens his historical investigation into the digital revolution with these simple words. As Christians, what are we to make of such an obvious statement? Some see technological innovation as something that takes place in a realm that God has nothing to do with. Others see computers and phones as tools of idleness at best and tools of evil at worst. One person has told me personally that God is not pleased at all with what we have done today because it is not as He intended humanity to live. On the other end, some Christians see technology as a wonderful gift. Though they can be the objects of covetousness and idolatry, they are amazing tools that can enrich our lives, yea, even our spiritual lives. However, I think the large majority of Christians fit into this category. Regrettably, they've simply not considered the topic at all. In this paper, I want to consider what many Christians have not. What can we learn from the Bible about God and the creation of man? Was God lying when He said that His creation was very good? Through the biblical canon, did God's people attempt to live as simply as Adam and Eve, or did they use the tools they had, even tools from pagan nations and pagan knowledge, as life progressed? Are there ways that technology comes short? Does God communicate with His creatures through the means they have in their time, and will those means ever be done away for something better? Though evils and pitfalls abound, and clearly there are many objections to the good use of technology in light of all the evils online, but that is not my intentions in this paper or in these videos. What are some practical ways technology can enrich the life of the believer and their children? These questions will loosely guide me as I attempt to place technology and innovation in a biblical theology framework. Lastly, I will bring in the secondary topic we studied this semester. In the class, we studied biblical theology, and as the semester went on, he gave us an example of his method of biblical theology with the topic of suffering. So with our minds, we learned the biblical theology method, and then with our hearts and in practice, an example, he told us how to look at suffering, for example. So back to the paper. Lastly, I will bring in the secondary topic we studied this semester, suffering, and see how it affected one of the greatest technological innovators of our lifetime. So that is how I opened the introduction part of my paper. Again, in the preface, I tried to draw in the reader with my own personal story. And then in the introduction, borrowing heavily from Walter Isaacson, and I'll show you the book a little later, Tony Reinke, and try to lay a groundwork, not from a personal viewpoint now, but from a historical viewpoint in the last 50, 60, 70 years or so, on just the importance of technology in our life. So I appreciate you watching. Next time, we will look at part 3, video 3 in the playlist, and I call that A Genesis of Technology. And my opening sentence in this section is this: in the beginning, God created. and those made in his image had followed the pattern. So I look forward to seeing you next time here on the YouTube channel. If any of this is interesting, I hope that you'll click the like, the subscribe, the comment, the share. Those of you who are Christians and interested in technology, I hope you'll share it with those who may be like-minded. If anybody's watching this who's not a Christian, but you do enjoy technology, I hope that these videos have been maybe thought-provoking on how the largest religion in the world, Christianity, one way that we Christians view this wonderful gift of technology. Spoiler alert, I don't believe it's a anarchy of Satan to take over the world. I believe that it falls up under the providence of God, and it's a very, very, very powerful and even beautiful tool that we can use for His glory. All right, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.